The migration crisis has reached a boiling point, and it's clear. Political leaders are fumbling at the wheel while the ship of national security drifts dangerously into uncharted waters. Sir Keir Starmer's recent remarks about the impossible task of halting small boat crossings should not be taken as a display of pragmatic caution, but as a direct admission of his inability to confront one of the most pressing issues facing the UK. The staggering numbers of illegal crossings are not simply a reflection of complex international logistics or the consequences of global conflict. They are a testament to years of failure and disjointed policymaking. Labour's missteps, compounded by its failure to develop a credible alternative, expose a party entirely unprepared to handle the consequences of uncontrolled immigration. The reality is this: no matter how much Starmer and his team may wish to downplay it, the UK is facing a crisis of governance. Under his watch, migration numbers have surged to alarming heights. Figures released show that, between July and March, 29,884 asylum seekers arrived on British shores, more than double the weekly rate of the previous Conservative administration under Rishi Sunak, and a stark contrast to the 400 per week average under Boris Johnson. How can Starmer, who now claims to take responsibility for tackling this issue, explain this staggering increase? To say that the issue is very challenging is to obscure the real problem. There has been no meaningful action from Labour to stem the tide of illegal immigration, let alone curb it. Major General Duncan Capps, head of the Small Boats Operational Command, is undeniably right in stating that the Home Office could disrupt the people smuggling business model and significantly reduce crossings. However, his candid acknowledgement that these crossings are unlikely to stop completely exposes the fallacy of Labour's optimistic rhetoric. Labour's expectation that migration numbers can simply be reduced to zero is not just unrealistic. It is a dangerous distraction from the true work that needs to be done. The assumption that the French coastline cannot be controlled is an inconvenient truth, but it should never be used as an excuse for inaction. The fact that Capps even suggests a perfect world, where his operations are no longer necessary, speaks volumes about the magnitude of the failure of current political leadership to recognise and respond effectively to the problem. Labour's response, at best, seems to be a strategic attempt to dodge responsibility. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp's insistence that Labour's decision to cancel the Rwanda plan was a direct consequence of the rise in migrant crossings is not mere politicking. It is the reality of a party whose strategy was all spectacle and no substance. The so-called Rwanda solution, while controversial and untested, was at least an attempt to deter illegal crossings. To simply abandon such efforts and replace them with abstract promises is the easy way out, one that avoids confronting the actual challenge of enforcing effective border controls. Reform UK's Lee Anderson rightly calls Labour's handling of illegal migration a national crisis. The current political atmosphere surrounding immigration does not just hinge on securing the borders. It touches on issues of national identity, economic stability, and the integrity of the welfare state. Migrants arriving on small boats are not the best and brightest seeking a new life in Britain. Far too often, they are individuals who fall through the cracks of international law enforcement, contributing to an unsustainable strain on public services, healthcare, and housing. As Anderson rightly points out, taxpayers are bearing the brunt of a system that has lost its focus and allowed the floodgates to open unchecked. But the crisis is not just about illegal immigration. It is about political cowardice and the inability to act decisively. Starmer's failure to craft a viable immigration policy or challenge the status quo of ineffective border controls leaves us on the edge of a precipice. As Capps warned, what Labour should avoid is simply displacing migrants into other illegal routes, effectively playing a game of whack-a-mole without ever addressing the core issue. This is not the response of a responsible government. It is the response of a party that has no clear vision for controlling the country's borders. It is time for Labour to stop hiding behind empty platitudes and half-hearted solutions. Immigration control is not just a political necessity. It is a moral and practical imperative. We cannot afford to maintain the illusion that simply talking about the issue will resolve it. Starmer and his team must accept the responsibility of not only curbing the number of crossings but eliminating the drivers behind them, people smugglers, criminals, and corrupt networks that profit off human misery. This requires tough, bold decisions, and a commitment to the sort of cross-border cooperation that has been sorely lacking under both Labour and Conservative leadership. If Labour is serious about taking control of this crisis, it must act now. The time for weak concessions and empty rhetoric is over. Britain cannot afford to wait for Starmer's hollow promises of tackling people smuggling like terrorism. While the political circus continues, the real consequences, soaring asylum numbers, overstretched public services, and increasingly desperate communities are mounting. The British people are watching, and they will not wait forever. Either the Labour Party steps up, or they risk losing not just the next election, but the faith of the very people they claim to represent.